All right, let's move into contracts. Now, if you recall from your principles class, contracts was a big section in your principles book, wasn't it? Do you guys remember all 13 different types of contracts that we have? Okay, for the state exam, you don't need to know all 13 different types of contracts. What you do need to know is what makes a contract valid. That's the first thing. What makes a contract voidable? And then also, what makes a contract void? Those are really the takeaways that you need to know when you walk in to take your state exam. So the first thing is, let's go through what makes a contract valid. So a valid contract has these 4 legal essentials. So the first one is you have to have mutual consent, which means both parties mutually agree to everything that's in the contract. What's included, what's excluded, what's the sale price, what's the closing date. That's mutual consent. And the way that we do this in real estate is through the offer-counteroffer process. The next thing is you have to have consideration. Some type of consideration. And it doesn't have to be money. Most of the time it is, of course, money, but it doesn't have to be money. It could be something else of value, like jewelry, a vintage car. It could be pretty much anything that the other party considers valuable. That's consideration. Anything of value. So one of the essentials is not money. It's called consideration, because consideration is a broader aspect than money. Number 3, a legal contract has to have capable parties. So just like a deed, the parties have to be 18 years or older, or they have to be emancipated minors, and they can't be judged mentally incompetent in the court of law. Number 4, and probably the most important, the contract has to be for something legal. It can't be illegal. So you can't have a contract with your local counterfeiter to purchase $1 million worth of counterfeit bills. That's not a contract at all, is it? Because it's for something illegal. Speaking about legal, the consideration also has to be legal. So you can't go and offer the seller a kilo of cocaine or 10 kilos of cocaine in exchange for their property. You can't do that, can you? So both the consideration and the contract have to be legal. So money is not an essential, is it? Performance is not an essential, is it? And contracts also don't have to be in writing. So according to the statute of frauds, not every contract has to be in writing to be valid. Not every contract has to be in writing to be valid. Okay, so now that we got that, we've established what makes a contract valid. So let's go through these here. Okay, first one. When we talk about bilateral, it means that one party agrees to do something and the other party agrees to do something. So both parties agree to do something. Sometimes we call that a promise for a promise. Another way of looking at it is, when we get into listings later on, a listing is a bilateral personal employment contract, where the broker promises to do something and the seller promises to do something. It goes something like this. The broker promises to exercise due diligence in procuring a purchaser meeting the terms of a listing agreement. And if the broker does, the seller promises to pay that broker a commission. It's a promise for a promise. Okay, next one. An executed contract is a contract that has been completely performed by both parties. That's an executed contract. So remember earlier when I was going through the escrow section, and it said you can have a complete or completed escrow where all the conditions have been met and we're ready to close? Obviously, when we closed, that would be an executed escrow. Alright, so we learned about what makes a contract valid. So let's learn about what makes a contract voidable. The first thing is, a voidable contract is binding upon the parties until rescinded by one of the parties. So a voidable contract is binding upon the parties until it's rescinded by the damaged party. Okay, so what would make a contract voidable? The first one would be duress. That's pretty straightforward. Duress. Let's give a quick example of that. Let's say, for instance, you have a rental property. And in that rental property, you have a renter. And every single month, on the first of the month, you go and collect that rent payment from your renter. So on the first of the month, you go to your rental property, you knock on your renter's door, they open up the door, and they hand you the rent payment. If you're standing there chatting with them, and you look over your shoulder and see that there's holes punched all in the wall and in the ceiling, so you ask your renter, hey man, what's up with the holes in the walls and the ceiling? And he's like, oh man, I had some people over, we got carried away a little bit. I know we broke the wall and messed up the ceiling, but I'll take care of it, I'll fix it. I'm good for it, I promise you, I'll get it fixed. So what happens is you leave. 30 days later, you go to the property again to collect the rent payment. The renter opens up the door, you look over their shoulder, and the holes are still in the ceiling and the wall. And you say to the guy, hey man, you told me last month you were going to get those things fixed. And he makes up more excuses and tells you again, I swear man, I'm good for it. I'll get it fixed. You have my word. So you're like, alright. So you take your rent check and you leave. Third month, you go to the property and the same damn thing. He opens up the door, you see the holes in the wall, and you're getting upset because the guy's giving you his word and he's not fulfilling his obligations. So what happens is this time is you grab the rent payment and you leave. And you think to yourself, I know this guy isn't good at keeping his word, so I need to do something. You put together a contract that says he needs to fix the property within 10 days. So again, the next month, you go back to the property, the guy opens up the door, and sure enough, the property isn't finished. It isn't fixed. And you're extremely upset. So you tell the guy, hey man, you've been telling me for over 4 months you're going to fix the wall and the ceiling. And because you haven't done it yet, I need you to sign this contract that says you're going to fix the property within 10 days. And the renter's like, whoa, I told you I'm going to fix it. I'm good for my word, but I'm not going to sign your contract. So at that particular point, you have a decision to make, don't you? You could either leave, or you could do something to motivate him. So what you do is, you reach behind you, and you pull out your gun. And you tell him, look here, dude, if you don't sign my contract right now, I'm going to lay into you. So he signs the contract, right? So did you force him to sign it against his will? That's duress right there. Now get this, for some reason the state exam loves firearms and alcohol. I don't know why. So usually duress is going to be a firearm issue. So in that situation right there, could the renter rescind that? Yeah, of course they could. But they would have to do it right away. Next one, menace or threats. Menace or threats can cause a contract to be voidable. Now I know that situation was a very far-fetched situation where we pulled a gun on that guy. But in reality, in the real world, it's most likely going to come down to menace or threats. So in that situation where he's refusing to sign my contract, I could say something to him like, hey dude, if you don't sign my contract right now, I'm going to throw you out. Is that a threat? Absolutely. So technically the contract is valid until he voids it. So valid until he voids it. Okay, last thing that you want to have on there is this, that an illegal purpose does not make a contract voidable. It makes it void. So an illegal purpose, like drugs, does not make a contract voidable, it makes it void. So the legal essentials of a valid contract, we already know: not money, not performance, and not writing. Not money, not performance, and not writing. Alright, here we go. Next one. So in real estate, the way that we're going to obtain mutual consent is through the offer and acceptance process. So in real estate, you have to have, it is a must-have, that you have the offer and acceptance process. So for a real estate contract to be valid, you must have an offer from the buyer to the seller, and the seller has to accept that offer and send it back to the buyer. That is a must-have for a real estate purchase contract. Alright, capable parties. Remember, with capable parties, remember that we said you have to be 18 or older, or an emancipated minor, and not judged mentally incompetent in the court of law. So that's in order to sign a contract, to sell or buy property. But can a minor acquire property by gift or inheritance? Yeah, of course they can. But can that same minor, all by themselves, turn around and sell that property? No, they can't. Very straightforward. So minors and incompetent individuals can acquire property through gift or inheritance, but they cannot sell it without court approval. Consideration. Consideration is something of value. Here are some words that describe consideration. You can have valuable consideration, good consideration, sufficient, adequate. Those are all terms that describe consideration. But in reality, the consideration just has to be valuable to the receiver. So the consideration has to be valuable to the receiver. Alright, next one. According to the statute of frauds, if a contract is not to be performed within 1 year, then it must be in writing to be enforceable in the court of law. So if the contract is not to be performed within 1 year, it must be in writing to be enforceable in the court of law. Okay, so what does that mean? If I wanted to rent an apartment for 9 months, does that lease agreement have to be in writing? No, not according to the statute of frauds. But if I was going to lease an apartment for 15 months, does it have to be in writing? Yes, because it's more than 1 year. Alright, so sometimes contracts don't work out. Sometimes we have to pursue damages in what we call the breach of contract. So anytime there's a breach of contract, a lot of the times we're going to settle it out with money. But sometimes that's just not good enough, depending on the situation. Let's say, for instance, we have a situation where there's a property in escrow, and we're on day 29 of escrow, and we're ready to close. The only thing that remains is for the seller to produce the title documents and sign the deed and pass the deed over to the buyer. And then we're all done. And all of a sudden, the seller gets cold feet. And they say all of a sudden, they can't do it, it's their grandfather's house, it's too sentimental. Do you think the buyer is going to be like, yeah, that's cool, we'll just wait another 90 days, find another property? Do you think they're going to be okay with that? No. So what would happen is, if they couldn't convince the seller to sign the document, what they would do is they would take them to court and they would sue them, not for money, not for damages. They would sue them to sign the deed, specific performance, and have the court tell the seller to sign the deed. And then they're done with the transaction right there. So in specific performance, it can only be brought by the parties in the contract. So what that means is only the seller can sue the buyer, and only the buyer can sue the seller. But a broker cannot bring forth a suit for specific performance because the broker is not a party in the contract. Only the parties in the contract can sue each other.